Okay, great. Hello, Don DeLuisi, Mary Beth Doucette. I'm pleased to be sharing this information with you about the Bredor Lakes CEPI Research Project, one of the Shared Future research projects that's based in Mi'kmaq Territory in the district of Unama'ki, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. This is the seventh and last video of a number of short videos that I've pre-recorded to facilitate knowledge sharing of the preliminary results of the Shared Future CEPI Research Project. In this video, we're going to be talking about the work of the CEPI and the work that CEPI does and the work that people around the CEPI table do as part of the CEPI Collaborative Environmental Planning Initiative. Okay, so this slide should be familiar. We just want to go through, as in every presentation, the objectives highlighting where we are in the process. So this is the end of the knowledge sharing, pre-recorded knowledge sharing videos. And in this project, there are two overarching objectives. One was to understand the pitfalls and possibilities and complexities of implementing Etowaptimunk two-eyed seeing within a long-term intersectoral partnership that's focused on human land health. And the second objective is to foster reflexivity, co-learning, and reconciliation within the CEPI by deepening CEPI members' understanding of Etowaptimunk two-eyed seeing, as well as strengthening your and our capacity and commitment to enact Etowaptimunk two-eyed seeing. So in this video, I'll be talking, as I said, about the work that the CEPI does. And now that we've reviewed all of the other topics, we want to begin strengthening our capacity and commitment to enacting two-eyed seeing and think about what that might mean for the work that CEPI does in the future. So what we're going to do today is walk you through some of the past projects and significant events of the CEPI, so things that are categorized perhaps as work that the CEPI has done in the past. We'll also focus in on some of the current priorities of the CEPI, and we'll look to start thinking about how these past and current priorities might influence the trajectory that CEPI is moving on towards future priorities that will have to be determined. And then, as always, we'll present some discussion questions that we would like to chat with you about in follow-up knowledge sharing sessions. And the dates of those sessions will be presented at the end of this presentation. If you want to pre-register, please contact Carolyn Barber. Okay, so the timeline of the work of the CEPI. So in this timeline, we've highlighted a variety of conferences, workshops, meetings, research publications, community engagement sessions, different co-learning sessions, nation-to-nation relationship building sessions, as well as some of the strategic partnerships that were established over time with the CEPI members and the people that are working in CEPI. This is how we've defined so far what we include as or might be included as the work of the CEPI. And we'd like you to think about which of these different activities that were enacted resonate with you and seem to be more in line with what you would expect the CEPI to be doing and to be supporting. In the interviews, a variety of these different examples were highlighted that once you listen to different people and their different perceptions about the work of the CEPI and what they do, both from within and with outside the CEPI, these were the quotes that we picked to that we thought spoke to some of the complexities around the CEPI mandate and the work the CEPI does. So the first one says, we had the multi-stakeholder multi-stakeholder meeting with Indigenous communities, the province, and other federal departments, ourselves and municipalities. They all met quite regularly to discuss about drafting what the plan would look like and came up with a version of which was drafted but never really implemented based on other things that happened after that. So this quote is speaking to the early days of CEPI when the CEPI was in the process of figuring out what a plan would look like. What kind of a plan does a planning initiative produce? And there was this impression that maybe we did have a draft version of a plan, but because of other things, perhaps related to the lack of clarity around organization and some of the tensions that existed in the early days, that plan never really got implemented in the way that it had been envisioned. Another one of the interviewees spoke to us about the Biosphere Reserve, and as an example of some of the complexities. The Biosphere Reserve is about helping people to learn how to live well within where they are. We don't do research where CEPI does, so it draws the comparison between what the Biosphere Reserve does and what CEPI does, and then what some of the other organizations are around the lake. So it really fits hand in glove very well with a third organization that is the Bredor Stewardship Society. It's strictly a volunteer organization, and it's strictly able to do whatever it wants. So it's a lovely little trifecta, and it took a little while to get that across. Along with this quote, we also had a conversation about which organizations have funding, and there's a perception that CEPI has perhaps more funding available to do things, but with that more funding comes less flexibility. Then the final quote that's here, the CEPI is a collaborative environmental planning initiative, whereas UINR is hands-on science, natural science. They're intimately associated with one another, but they're not the same thing. And so again, this quote speaks to the multiple organizations that CEPI is related to and works closely with, but there's some sense that perhaps the work that CEPI is doing may be getting entangled with, conflated with the work that some of these other organizations are doing. And so there's really a sense that maybe we need to clarify some of that. The pitfalls of these complexities is that if there isn't clear communication about CEPI's purpose, CEPI's mandate, the scope of work, and how that circulates within and beyond the organization, people may be have the potential to get confused about what work is being done by CEPI, what the work of CEPI should be, and what CEPI priorities are being funded by funds available to CEPI. So here, these different 5 quotes, I'll just read them out, and I invite you to think about them a little bit longer as I'm reading them. What does this say about the work of CEPI? The first quote says, "It's a little dicey. So what I'm saying then is that some of the distinctions amongst the organizations aren't as clear as they could be, and that might be causing a little bit of problem with some of the government departments that are supporting it. I know it has in the past been an issue." The second quote, "What we did is we got a conference together in November 2016. That's speaking about the People of the Lake Speak conference. And then after that conference, we took forestry on as one of the sectors. We said, well, let's study sustainable forestry inside the Bredor Lakes. And that's when we ran into a brick wall. Senior council said, no, this is outside of your mandate. And we were shocked because we had just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a conference and government money to establish what the work of CEPI or priorities of CEPI should be. And this was government money that now all of a sudden we were not expected to support. So that, again, some of the pitfalls is lack of communication. In the third quote, we have, so in that survey, we went to communities, we went to Chapel Island, we went to powwows, we went all over the island and we interviewed youth and we told them what we were doing. And we asked, what would they like to be involved in the CEPI? And so this speaks to some of the work that CEPI Youth has done over the years and whether or not this was considered work of the CEPI. The fourth quote, it's almost gotten to the point now that we had to be careful. Nothing scandalous or whatever, but we just kind of seen that people see how well it works and they came with the idea that really isn't the proper fit for CEPI. So this quote is speaking to people who now see, CEPI is a great opportunity for networking and for getting involved and getting some things done. But when they come forward with some suggestions, they may not necessarily fit with what the CEPI should be doing or should be prioritizing. It doesn't fit with the mandate of the CEPI. Finally, again, speaking about the work that the CEPI Youth has done, or the things that CEPI Youth have done, this quote says, Olneweg invited CEPI Youth to Halifax for a digital Mi'kmaq training. In this training, CEPI Youth learned how to program and move tiny robots using digital commands. We've done quite a few things this year. Eskasoni Dream Team, ACAP Transformers, UINR, Cape Breton Environmental Association, and CEPI Youth all gathered in Eskasoni on August 9th to clean up a dump site. So again, this is an example of multiple organizations, this time youth-centered organizations and environmental-centered organizations that CEPI is closely connected to, and even CEPI Youth were involved in some of the programming. And yet, when you have all of these groups together, it's not always clear who is doing what or what work is getting done. And I don't know if that's a problem or a possibility for CEPI. So the possibilities that we want to highlight here, there's two main possibilities we'd like to discuss with everyone. They both came out of suggestions from the interviews. One is to promote the CEPI as a unique model of working towards reconciliation. This is very much in line with the reason why the A Shared Future team wanted to spend some time thinking about and learning about how CEPI is integrating two-eyed seeing. The first quote says, I very consciously realized that this is not normal, what we're doing at CEPI. This is special, and hopefully someday it will be normal across the country. There's a need around the world. And that's speaking again to the type of work and the way that CEPI is working as a model. The second quote there is, it's not become recognized in its own right. That wasn't the case in the early days of CEPI. It was all viewed as fake science, but I guess like Cheryl and Albert, they really changed a lot of people's minds around the table that what the Mi'kmaq people have to offer was, for instance, two-eyed seeing and traditional ecological knowledge. And so this quote was speaking about two-eyed seeing and how CEPI has been related to and using two-eyed seeing in their organizing processes. The second group of possibilities that are here, we want to highlight making CEPI Youth and its activities more visible within the CEPI, within the wider organization. So these three quotes speak to the CEPI Youth. Absolutely, yeah, the first one says, yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, the goal, if I'm phrasing this right, the goal would be that CEPI Youth could work as sort of a youth retention strategy, a way to keep or at least have youth return to the watershed and to Cape Breton. The second quote says, and our first meeting actually was to bring CEPI Youth to high school students. So that was our first project to put a workshop on, and I think it was at Dalbray Academy, and I heard it went very well. So this is a CEPI Youth member talking about some of the projects that they've done in the name of CEPI Youth. And the last one here says, again, another example of a project. They went to St. Anne's Mission as well to kind of bring awareness and attention to the disruption of the Bredor Lakes watershed and surrounding areas. And they just wanted to make sure that everyone keeps it very clean. They distributed bright orange cans for cigarette butts, and they were actually a huge hit. People were even asking them to bring them to their cabins. And so I know when I went to this presentation and we heard the CEPI Youth talking about the orange cans at the St. Anne's Mission, a number of people on the CEPI around the table were really happy and excited to hear of these small efforts, and they learned something because they realized that cigarette butt filters are actually plastic and they don't degrade. So in conclusion, for this presentation and the last conversation set of discussion questions that we're proposing to chat about via the live Zoom sessions, what is the CEPI's aspiration as an organization? So looking forward, looking to the future, what are we aspiring to do at the CEPI? When and where are youth and elders included in CEPI events? What rationale is used regarding who is included in the CEPI operations and projects? What is CEPI's role in succession planning for Cape Breton and for Unama'ki? Is there a need for succession planning within the organization? That's looking forward to the future. Do we have a plan to make sure that more people are being engaged and are aware of what's going on with CEPI? Another question here is what metrics are currently used to determine if the CEPI is succeeding and fulfilling the mandate of the charter? Are the current metrics appropriate, and what should new metrics be if we need them? Is ongoing dialogue enough? Is a number of conferences or projects significant? And and so again, this speaks to the idea of how do we measure the work of the CEPI and the success of the CEPI for those who want to know that there's something that we can see definitively or point to as success. The last couple of questions. So what needs to change or what needs to adapt within the CEPI? We've been adapting since the very beginning. So are there more adaptations required? How do we communicate the complexity and its potential to a broader stakeholder audience within Cape Breton? Um, and then the last piece is when we reflect back on the vision, the mission, and the purpose and how CEPI enacts each of these, do we have a definitive answer when we're talking about the potential of what the CEPI work is? So with that, the work of the CEPI will be the topic of our last Zoom session that will be on December 3rd. And we ask you to pre-register for these online group discussions with Carolyn Barber at cbu.ca, and she'll send you the meeting link presentations. And if you aren't able to make any of these meetings, but you want to share your ideas or you want to contribute, please also you can send information through to myself or to Carolyn Barber at cbu.ca. So Walalia, thank you, Demoltis, and we'll see you soon.